Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Davis. You're listening to the EvoSec Podcast. I'm super excited about tonight's guest. I am joined by Cade Cole of the Roadhouse School of Hunters and Guides. Welcome to the show, Cade.
Thanks for having me on, man.
So did I get your primary business correct there?
Yep. It's a Roadhouse School for Hunters and Guides. And my website's down right now. But yeah, so it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm a hunting guide, but I run seminars and in the field courses for beginner hunters, late onset hunters, and guys who are just ambitious and want to learn a little extra.
That's awesome, man. I found you on YouTube, and probably because I do a lot of firearm stuff on there myself, and you popped in, and I really liked what you are doing. I like the things you're saying. You're calling folks out too. I think sometimes people, you're not rude about it, which we're going to talk a little bit about this, but I think it's important to challenge people, and so we're going to hit on it. I just find it apropos that we are heading into just a few days, the celebration of our 250th birthday. And, with what you do, with what we do in this show, definitely a celebration of our founding, the Second Amendment, and the frontiersman. And am I wrong in using that term? I like to think of guys like you as being the modern frontiersman. Am I going too far with that description?
It's interesting because I think there's similarities and there's some differences there, but for the most part, the frontier is gone, right? Like the West has been settled.
True.
With GPS mapping and all these things, even just in the last couple of years, like every inch of the earth has pretty well been explored now. However, when I first started in this industry, when I first started guiding backcountry hunts, I didn't have Onyx. I didn't have all the GPS mapping systems. I didn't have a smartphone or any of those things. So in a lot of ways, I really appreciated, what I was able to do, that I felt like it was something that other people don't get to experience, to go out on a horse and spend weeks at a time out in the wilderness and try to navigate by map, and explore new areas and hunt and tap into a little bit of that relationship with sufficiency and living off the land. And I think that it really opened my eyes to, in a lot of ways, maybe that I do have a relationship with a frontiersman, but also how little I have in comparison, and just how, for the lack of a better term, like how badass a lot of those guys were. And we really take that for granted. So when people say modern day frontiersmen, it's like, yeah, modern day in a diminished sense, because you're never going to fill those shoes,
Yeah. Yeah. And Cade, you're a humble person. I think that is a great way to look at it. You're right, man. Consider what was going on in the real frontier back then, as you mentioned, as brave men and women in many cases went westward, and in super rough conditions. Of course, we can look back on our history. We don't have to go down that road right now, but yeah, it is amazing what those men and women endured, and we are forever in their debt, because this wonderful nation, rather, you hear it from, I don't want to get down to a political realm, but let's just face it. A lot of time the media, and some politicians browbeat the United States as being evil. But I'll just add this, just going off on a little bit of a tangent. Have you seen how the Europeans have been acting towards the United States during this World Cup?
Yeah, it's crazy all the way around, right? I think the Western civilization in itself is we're cannibalistic, right? Like it's this culture of consume, and we have no thought looking back to how all of these countries were founded, the principles that they were founded on, like how amazing uh, our transition has been for human rights, for civilization in general, and especially for comfort. And in a lot of ways, I think that we're victims to our own comfort. So it's easy for people in Europe and the United States to, look back and do nothing but criticize, and I think that in a lot of ways, right, like a little bit of criticism is good because it helps us, to innovate. It helps us to become better. So we have to be a little bit self-critical, but you can't be so self-critical that you disrespect, your entire foundation. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, I feel like the Western civilization has disrespected and disregarded its own foundation.
Absolutely. And that's why I find it so encouraging. A lot of these Europeans are saying, "Hey, we were lied to. The United States is amazing. They're free. They love so much about our culture." And it takes an event like the World Cup for some of them, because none of them, excuse me, a lot of them have never been here. Thousands of them have never been here,
Right.
and now they're like opening their eyes to, man, this is what the United States is about. So again, I'm pretty pumped about the way they've been acting about it, and yes, I think it's very important for us to remember that we still live in the freest, the most prosperous, and a nation with the most opportunity for anyone, regardless of what we're being told. But anyway, I don't get too far away from. I want to give you a chance real quick for our audience members that don't know you. You mentioned some of what you do now, but give us a little bio, where you're from, what brought you into this, and whatnot.
Okay, so yeah, I live out at the base of the Wind River mountain range in Wyoming, and I'm a hunting guide by trade. I actually grew up in Central Texas,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
yeah, so I like Texas, and I was very fortunate to grow up in a rural area with a family that was, very hunting centered, and very self sufficient, and took a lot of pride in that. And I really enjoyed to read. So I read a lot about the mountains. I read about adventure and all those things. And unfortunately, Texas is pretty well settled. There's not a lot of public land opportunities. There's quite a bit of development, even more so now. And so once I was in my late teens, I decided I wanted to head north, and I ended up out in the mountains, and I was able to just kind of stick with hunting, and I carved what someone would call a niche opportunity out of it, and I've been very fortunate. I guide hunts all over the Mountain West, everywhere from Montana to down to Mexico, basically, and I've guided bighorn sheep and mountain goats and elk and deer and wolves and bears, and I mean just about anything you can hunt in North America. I've been fortunate enough to hunt professionally, and it's opened a lot of avenues for me. And one in particular is that, over the past few years, I really, I guess I should say, since the beginning of my career, I started to kind of catalog data on the deficits of hunters. And one thing about being a professional hunting guide is that you meet people from different countries, different cities. I mean, all over. I've guided guys from West Coast, East Coast, everything in the middle, guys from Europe. I mean, I've guided a ton of guys in a ton of different habitats for a ton of different species. And you notice deficits that are usually, they run around the same. And so I thought, what I need to do is I need to build a foundation, with some other guys I know that are seasoned guides, and offer like a learning curve advancement where you can come in, you can take a class, and you can, basically jump ahead as a beginner hunter or a late onset hunter that doesn't want to learn all those hard lessons that take, 10 years, 15 years of guiding hunts to learn, and just offer that to them as a business. And, it's so far, it's working really well. I've had really good feedback, and I'm trying to kind of make that my main business moving forward, and maybe start guiding a few less hunts and just having more classes. And I get a lot more out of the teaching, the instruction side of it, than I do, killing animals on the side of the mountain.
I think that it sounds like your business model is moving in the right direction. There, no doubt, guys like me included. I mentioned pre-show that I'm a rank amateur when it comes to hunting. I've definitely taken a few whitetail in Oklahoma where I'm from, but I'm not going to BS. My dad was so impatient at times, bless his heart, may he rest in peace. He didn't let me do a lot of the skinning either, so I'm like, man, I look back at that. So, I mean, I can do it, but I wish I had experienced that more. So I'm one of those individuals that probably benefit from your classes extensively. So what I would ask you is, you talked about deficiencies in hunters. Can you enumerate a few of those that you help with?
Probably the biggest deficiency that I encountered over the years is there's not an overwhelming sense of uh, like self-awareness when it comes to proficiency among shooters. And it's unfortunate because what happens is there's a lot of ego involved, right? Like the shooting industry in itself. I mean, ego is just rampant.
Good
And
Lord,
so,
yes.
and I found out even worse once I started, a couple of years ago, I started creating content, obviously to kind of help. And I mean, that's how you found me, but I make a lot of shooting content, and I noticed that in the shooting content world as well, that you've got a lot of ego, but you also don't have a lot of self-awareness. So everything is very flat range oriented. Everything is very competition shooting oriented, and you don't have a ton of information that is like organic real world shooting. I hate to say that the word real world shooting, but it's true, because it's not a mock setup, it's not a competition, it's not a pre-planned course of fire. It's how things happen in the real world. And that's probably the biggest deficiency that I see from guys is they have a hypothetical baseline of accuracy. Like everybody on the internet is a sub-minute shooter, right? And so there's this like hypothetical
They claim to
baseline.
be.
Yes. And there are a lot of guys that from the bench they are a sub-minute shooter. Um
Oh,
and then
and you have to forgive me.
yeah.
My brain heard sub-second, but you're talking about minute of angle.
Yep,
See,
yep,
my
yep.
my brain's on pistol shooting. Go ahead, but please, yes,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. So I mean, so there's a lot of like, I mean, and it all plays in, right? So you have this idea of, well, I'm a sub-minute shooter and I'm capable of shooting 500 yards, and I can do all these things. And then you get out on the field, and now the ground is wet and snowy, and your rifle, you can't feel your fingers. And I've got a 15-mile-an-hour crosswind with gusts of 25 miles an hour. And I've got an animal that's slightly quartering two. And you've got all these different variables that you don't really account for. And when you're on the flat range, the way that we measure shooter proficiency is very unrealistic, because guys that go to a range, they go to a long range shooting school, any of these things, and we lay down at 500 yards, and you set up with your rifle, and you've got all the time in the world to set up with your bipod, you're flat, you make sure you're prone, you check your kestrel. I gauge my wind, I shoot, and maybe a guy he's half a minute off, or he's maybe he's a whole minute off, right? And you realize that your wind call downrange was a little bit off, not bad, just a little off. So you make an adjustment, and then you go 10 for 10, and he'll shoot 10 for 10, make an impact 10 out of 10, but he had a sighter. You don't get that in the real world.
Yeah.
You don't get that. So you have to deal with factual information, which ultimately to me means get closer. Like in my job, it means get closer. And it falls down, it trickles down from that point into, it's not just accuracy baseline, it's shooting positions. It's, I mean, oh, well, I know that I could shoot off my backpack, or, I see a lot of NRL guys and PRS guys now that everybody wants to use the like glassing tripod,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's using the two tripod thing, which is it's a great idea. But it's not really applicable to a lot of hunting situations where I just need you to lay down and shoot off a log or something like this. And then it turns out, well, I'm a sub-minute shooter off the bench, but now I'm shooting off a frozen log and I can't feel my fingers. and everything starts to fall apart. And if you've never trained in that position, if you've never trained shooting off a trekking pole or shooting off your backpack or shooting off a natural rest, then the anxiety level just goes up. And like we know, once the anxiety comes up, then everything else goes down. Your accuracy
Shooting
diminishes.
performance diminishes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of guys of, well, I'm properly prepared in this like, ideology that, well, I'm obviously very prepared. And then you get out in the field and you have that shock of, oh, I'm not prepared. And then the anxiety skyrockets, the
Yep.
performance diminishes, and then a guy's he's ruined. He's essentially ruined for an entire hunt. And that's what I'm trying to prevent. It's put guys in these awkward positions. And that's a lot of my content. You have guys that are like, well, I would just use a bipod. And you're like, well, after killing hundreds of big game animals, like I know for a fact you're not going to use your bipod. But you can't. You almost want to shake people.
Yep. and really, Cade, I can only really compare that with the firearms self-defense community, and specifically where I hold some expertise is in the combatives realm, combining the weapons-based environment. And you hit it on the head. The ego is such it shuts people down from being available to learn, both mentally and then there's the Dunning-Kruger effect where people don't know what they don't know. And and it's especially rampant amongst men more than women. There's a little bit in women, but I teach quite a bit of both genders, and women are just so much easier to teach, at least on the side of what we do. But yeah, it's so frustrating that we've refined things over the years where we have, like you mentioned, we have developed these answers the hard way. And you get an individual that has come to you and said, hey, I want to learn from you. But then they're like, question, well, why would we do it this way? And then another example I've been talking about recently, somebody that we've spent a lot of time with, multi-time alum under a gentleman by the name of Craig Douglas of ShivWorks. So he is definitely in the niche area of combatives and combining weaponry in an entangled fight. He is one of the most sought after, if not sought after. And I'll see these jackasses come on his YouTube channel and just talk the most disrespectful BS that they've got all these answers above what these guys that have been doing this, in a real environment, in say for his instance, where he learned a lot or at least theorized and then built it in an undercover narcotics role, and then some of the people that work with him, in one of his guys is a former SEAL. I believe he's in SEAL Team 6. Not that always means anything. I'm saying one of his guys is a infantryman from the Marine Corps. These guys have been in real situations, and these guys that you can tell they don't know what in the world they're talking about, but because it's the internet and their ego, they can parrot something that they've heard online or something they saw on some video, and then they own it like it's their information. And it's certainly a shame, but I'm sure you've probably seen the same on your content.
Oh
Is what it
yeah.
kind of sounds like.
Oh yeah, and it's funny actually. I follow him online and I love his content because it's just reality based, right? But unfortunately, the internet is the Wild West, and anybody can say anything, and there's a unique thing that happens on the internet, especially in the shooting realm, as well. I wouldn't say as much in the hand to hand combatives, but especially on the shooting side, is that you have this form of peer pressure where what happens is you have an individual that has real world experience, and usually it has been my experience that the more real world experience that someone has, the less faith they have in gear and tactics, because you just know that things fall apart under pressure, and that's just the reality of it. But what you have is this peer pressure, and it's usually among like commenters on the internet. Like, for instance, me, a lot of times I call out and say, hey, realistic accuracy standards are like, they're so much lower than what people believe that they are. Everybody loves to say like, oh, I'm a minute shooter. It's like, man, shooting a 10 round sub-minute group at any distance is hard. It's very
Absolutely.
hard. It takes, like, not every rifle can do it. Not every ammunition can do it. 99% of shooters can't do it. But when we have this like overwhelming perception that everybody is a sub-minute shooter because everybody claims to be, then there's this peer pressure that guys get, and it goes two ways. You have guys that, well, they're just going to flat out lie because they don't want to be embarrassed that they're not as good as everybody else obviously is. And then you also have guys that they have this sort of like retreat into themselves, and then they're like, oh man, what am I doing wrong? Why am I so bad at this? And unfortunately, I see both of those guys in my profession, right? And I'll have guys that, they message me and they're like, man, I just, like, no matter what I do, I cannot shoot tighter than like an 1.5-inch group at 100 yards with my 300 Ultra Mag. And I'm like, dude, that's incredible. That rifle's got a massive amount of recoil and this and that. I'm like, that's probably as good as your ammunition will do. Like, that's amazing. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you get a guy that he'll shoot 10 boxes of bullets or 10 bullets out of a box a year and show up with the other 10 bullets, and he's like ready to go hunting, but he's going to tell you that I'm a sub-minute shooter, and so it's like so hard for both sides that you have just unrealistic performance, and it creates like an identity crisis, right? That, it's either, well, I'm so much better than I am, and I begin to believe it because all I do is talk about how much better than I am, or I cannot meet these standards that everyone else apparently does, and like, what's wrong with me? And
Right.
usually those individuals end up doing better because they seek instruction and they're so willing to learn that they really, really blossom,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think, again, in your profession, people are seeking you out. And I'm not saying, I want to digress a second. I'm not saying that we always have an issue with people that have paid to take a class. Every now and then you will, and usually when I'm doing my briefing, I try to get that out of the way where I say, okay, today we may ask you to do something that is uncomfortable for you, or it just doesn't feel right, or you've saw somebody else do it differently, or their philosophy on marksmanship is different, the way you grip the gun, your stance, all of these things. And what I'll say is, I just, please give us a chance today and try what we're espousing. And if you don't like it after this class, discard it. Perfectly welcome to do so. And we also open up the floor. If you are completely dissatisfied with the product that you received today, we will refund your money. And, we're not huge in the amount of classes that we teach compared to our mentors, but we've never had somebody ask for a refund, And so my point behind that is I really think that the individuals that seek out training, in many cases, they've already decided they want to be there. So it's the people that's blabbing their mouths on the internet. Well, we've beat that horse a bit, but I think it's a good segue into something. It's in the same realm, and I think it's a good time to cover it. And this revolves around the fallacy of seeking gear for performance, and I'm sure you've seen it. I saw you talk about it, and let me frame it in two ways. So you talked about, in one of your videos, you said that, you got individuals that wait 20 years to get a tag for a mountain goat or this big moose, and they're excited they got their tag, and they contact you and say, man, I want to get this whiz bang awesome new rifle. And you seemed like you were honestly frustrated with that type of attitude. And you were like, hey, but you had a 30-06 in your safe that's just sit there, when you would prefer them to get really good with that 30-06 bolt gun, get a gym membership, get fit. And I'm assuming you probably want them hiking with a ruck and whatnot. So that's the premise there. But also, I want to give the same comparison to the self-defense community. you'll have dudes do the same thing. They want this new whiz bang 2011, 1911 clone with the red dot. And I run red dots too. But people that don't even understand iron sights don't need to get a red dot, because they're always going to be losing a dot until they develop their presentation. But they want all this gear when they can't even outshoot the stock Glock that they have, or their M&P. So I guess what is your real thoughts on? I'd like you to expound upon that. Do you see that a lot, and people just wanting to buy gear instead of owning the fundamentals with their rifle?
Yeah, I think it's probably as bad in the hunting realm as it is anywhere, because there's a whole industry that has become, I mean, massive over the last 20 years, as far as marketing to hunters. Aspirational hunting, having, like if you're going to go kill a whitetail in Kansas, you should have the same gear as the guy that's on a $70,000 Marco Polo hunt. I mean, it's like an aspirational marketing thing, and you'll see it a lot. That's why when you open up a QU catalog, it's not a guy hunting whitetail deer. It's a guy on the side of the mountain with a stone sheep or whatever. And so it drives people into that consumerism that we're all naturally susceptible to, especially, as Americans. We're very consumerism based people. I mean, it's our culture at this point. And so it's easy, right? It's easy to go buy something that's cool, and it's easy to buy something with a guarantee on it, right? Where like, oh, well, this rifle it's a sub-minute guarantee, and these pants, they're guaranteed to keep me dry. And I mean, you go on and on and on and on about, carbon fiber tripods and all these things that are, that I never could afford. And so that's what founded, my opinion on a lot of these things. Is when I started out doing this, I was doing it in blue jeans with an Alice pack, and Walmart, like Nikon Pro Staff binoculars. I mean, I was doing it with a very, very tight budget, and I was taking guys out on, once in a lifetime hunts, and I was having success with it. And then over the years, you start to see guys that exactly what you're talking about, where, well, I've been hunting at home with this same rifle that my grandpa hunted with, and I shoot it 5 times a year to make sure it's on for the season. And, so the guy, he's been hunting with that his whole life. He knows how to use it, but he's not intimately familiar with it. He's not an expert with that weapon, but he does know how to operate, knows where the safety is, knows how to cycle it, understands the recoil, like the feel of the stock, everything about it, the optic. I mean, he knows everything about the rifle, even if he's not an expert with it. So if he abandons that as someone that's a casual shooter anyways, now you've got a rifle with a new feel, a new action, safety manipulation's different, the bolt feels different, recoil feels different, you have to get a new optic. And now this guy is just totally lost. And he's $3,000 broker and more lost. And if you spent $3,000 on that, on ammunition, and went out and, and just shot every single day, well, when it comes time for your hunt, you're going to be much better off. But the reality is people don't do that. I mean, they just don't. They go buy something new because it's this big event and it's like on a celebratory and there's an excuse to buy it. And then lo and behold, you show up with your $4,500 rifle setup, but you don't know your drop at 400 yards with a 200 yard zero. Dope. Exactly. And then so now I'm on the side of the mountain trying to do trigonometry for this guy that I've never met with a rifle that I don't own. And I'm trying to think like, okay, like how many minutes of drop am I going to be seeing? And I'm trying to gauge when to do all these things. And I'm basically forced to get them into a situation that, maybe isn't even possible so that they can have success. Makes my job harder.
Oh, right? Yeah, I bet that's real hard to thinking as you enunciated that. I'm thinking, man, because I mean, depending on the rifle itself, the velocity could be different between the length of barrel, the BC of the bullet, and again, is it really zeroed at 100 or is it zeroed at 50? Do they really know?
I don't know. I don't know.
And so which drastically can change the dope. And Yeah.
And I don't know how honest that individual is either. I don't know if his based on capability is what he claims it to be. So I'm forced to just assume that everyone is at like level one.
As you probably should. Now, I'm curious, do you check their zero before you go out, or do you even have that opportunity?
I can't. I try to if I can, but I'm not always allowed. It depends on where I'm hunting and how I'm doing it. Because sometimes, I'm getting transferred guys on the side of the mountain. I don't meet them until it's time to hunt. Sometimes I'm meeting a guy on the side of the interstate. Like to literally hike up a mountain because that's where the unit is. I mean, it's just there's a lot of travel logistics and stuff. Uh, Fortunately, at this point in my career, I'm able to vet people a lot better and only take certain hunts. But when I started out, it was the Wild West. I'm just hoping that a guy has the right kind of bullets for his gun, and most people do. Most people do, but overwhelmingly, I would say 99% of clientele are what I would consider D-level shooters. And
Yeah.
I think that this is something that I'll kind of segue in here. This is going to piss people off. It always pisses people off when I say it. But when it comes to that like fallacy that's there, we have what I would tie into that, like what I formerly mentioned, the identity crisis, because I have a guy he's an IT tech, right? And or he's an office nerd somewhere, and he wants to go on this backcountry elk hunt. And so he gets online and he researches this rifle, and it's supposed to be a good rifle for hunting elk. And he's an office nerd, so he doesn't know anything about hunting elk. So he reads about hunting elk, and he reads about the gun, and then he goes and buys all these different bullets, and then he tests them, and he sees what's good. And then he gets his rifle zeroed at 200, and then he reads online on a forum that he needs to know what his drop is at 3, 4, 500 yards because that's what the internet says he needs to be able to shoot. And so he puts all this data together, and he's really intimidated by it. And he shows up, and he's like, "Hi, my name's so-and-so." And he's like, kind of got this like anxiety, right? Of like, I'm an office nerd. I'm not a big game hunter, but I really want to be successful. And I bought this gun and I got these bullets and I did all this. And that guy shows up, and I love him because this guy has done his research. And on the other hand, I have another guy, and he's going to come in. He comes in, and he's got a nice rifle, and he's like, "I'm a Green Beret." And I'm like, "Oh man, like, do you know your drop?" And it's like offensive, right? It's like offensive to this guy because, of course, I know everything there is to know about guns. I'm a Green Beret. And it's like that ego has crept into the chat. And unfortunately, vets and cops are the two worst demographics of clientele that I have for that, because it's the ego thing. Well, it's like insulting for me to be questioned, but it's also like it almost like demeaning in a way to try to practice a new craft. And it's like, man, this is a different ballgame. This is a different world. You have to prepare yourself, or you are going to damage your ego. But I mean, what's the loss? But it's kind of that Dunning-Kruger effect, identity crisis of like, well, I'm supposed to be the guy, so I must be the guy, and it's not really a big deal until it is.
Yeah, yeah, and interestingly enough, I am here outside of Fort Bragg, so obviously the home of Special Forces, and I have a lot of friends that are Green Berets and some unit guys too. In many cases, I'm not coaching in the mornings anymore at my jiu-jitsu gym, at least recently, because I just got back from a deployment. But half those dudes showed up were SF dudes, and we get to shooting together. And I'm careful that I don't represent this incorrectly, because those dudes are badasses. I did not do anything sexy when I was in the Army. But one thing is certain, not all of them are at the top level of shooting. They don't need to be. They need to be good at all kinds of tasks. They need to be good with radios. They need to be good with, their communications plans. They need to be good at jumping out of airplanes. They need to be good at patrolling, small unit tactics, all these things, indigenous forces, all that other stuff that they have to do. So, I mean, I shoot with a lot of them. Now, there are some really freaking good ones like GMs and USPSA, a couple of my buddies. But the point being is that, yeah, they aren't always the top of the rung in shooting, and certainly not with longer range shooting. They're good with carbines. You know, some of them, if they go to sniper school, they might be a lot better. But anyway, I could see that being an issue.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like it's not a disrespect thing.
No, not
It's
at
a
all.
it's a different job, and I think that's where I have a lot of frustration in my profession. Is there's no standardized training, right? So for me to know what I know, I mean, I could give you, you know, drop rates. You could bring me a rifle that I've never seen before. Tell me what it's chambered in. I can look at the barrel. For the most part, I can if I know for a fact what your zero is, I can have you hitting the 500 yards. That's what I've been doing for 15 years now. But um, like the thing about it is that is my realm, and I had to take personal responsibility for that, and in my knowledge base. And unfortunately, for a lot, I mean, for like especially military shooting and police training at the most, um, it's subsidized, right? So like your
Absolutely.
department is in charge of your training, and I have never understood that because for a carpenter to be an amazing carpenter, he has to take his knowledge into his own hands. Like he has to seek that out. For you to be a doctor, there isn't a heart surgeon on the planet that his hospital paid for him to learn how to be a heart surgeon. He had to put up the money and say, hey, I'm dedicated to be the best there is at this, and I'm going to pursue that. For me as a hunting guide, I had to put my own time, effort, money, knowledge in to say, hey, I want to be the best that there is at this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of hunting guides that don't know shit. They don't know anything because they're not incentivized to. It's up to you if you want to be the best. And I hate that when I talk to like cops, especially, that like, well, my department won't fund good training. Like, man, if you want to be the best, like, you got to go out, you got to seek that, and everybody I know that has, you show me a police officer, highway patrolman, whatever, that has spent money out of his own pocket on training. That's the dude I trust in my life.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
that's the guy. If you're complaining about how, well, my department won't pay for this or that, like, dude, you're
Yeah,
the reason I carry. Because I know
yeah.
when I call, if I had to call 911 and you show up, I mean, and there's millions of people in this country rely on those guys, and that's
Mm-hmm.
pathetic.
Well, and if I can add to that, a lot of my friends are law enforcement, but guess what? Those dudes that are good friends of mine, I've got to know them through this small training community. And again, other badasses. These dudes are badasses. And you know why? Just like you said, they are paying for training on their own time and dime. That's a phrase that we use a lot in this industry. And you're right, man. It is sad when police officers out there, and a lot, I know we got a lot of them listening, and a lot of folks in the industry, again, that are mentors of ours, listen to this show, and they'll tell you the same thing. I mean, you got law enforcement departments that they see their qualification as the end all be all, and they are completely that they're off base with that, because those qualifications are easy in most cases, or they're at the standard bandwidth of what's a solid score, and what's passing is so great of a bandwidth.
Right.
It's yeah, it's people passing shouldn't be carrying a gun in many cases, and that's the truth. There's
Right.
some cops out there that should not be carrying out there. It's just a fact, and I don't want to piss off my law enforcement brethren. I think most of the ones that do listen to our show, they completely agree. Now, that said, Cade, so I want to really premise this, and that again, that's one of the reasons I discovered you, because for our audience members out there, Cade does some awesome marksmanship demonstrations. He puts it out there for everybody to see, and that's very respectable. I mean, and again, back to what I was saying earlier, you call folks out. Hey, put yourself out there. With that said, let's get to brass tacks. what, number one, what do you expect people to do to prepare for a hunt? And then also follow that up with what your normal training regimen looks like for yourself. I mean, you go down as far as you want to, as little as you want, but if you could just delineate what you expect people to do, and then also what's your normal training regimen and preparation across the board look like?
For the most part, my expectations for hunters, what I try to tell everybody that if that's going to rifle hunt with me, is I want you to be able to shoot. I want you to be able to shoot from prone. Obviously, prone first. Everybody wants to shoot from prone, but I need you to be able to shoot from prone off your backpack. Prone off the backpack is a non-negotiable. It's a very easy starting point for guys. Second, seated off the pack. Seated off the backpack it's. I can't tell you how many animals, I probably over 50 or so, are seated off the pack, because it's something you already have with you. It doesn't take time to deploy. And it really should just be a baseline, expectation for a guy that his hunter can shoot seated off the pack. And then I try to tell everybody, if you've got a bipod, I want you to be able to shoot from seated off the bipod. And then obviously natural rest if you can. But that's basically my itinerary is prone off the pack, seated off the pack, seated with a bipod. And seated with a bipod, seated with a pack is usually, that's our high probability shooting scenarios. As far as myself, I do a lot of offhand shooting because the reality of it is, whether anybody wants to discuss the ethics or this or that, most animal killing happens inside 200 yards. Most opportunity presents itself inside 100. And a lot of guys just aren't prepared for that because they view it as non-opportunity, where I'm walking through the woods and maybe I see a giant whitetail buck. And this happens to a ton of East Coast hunters. I mean, hunters all across the world. This happens is you see this deer or elk or whatever it may be at 75 yards. And it's partially obstructed in the trees, but you can see it. You can see its vitals. And it stands there and it stares at you for 3 to 5 seconds. And then it's gone. And if you hop on the internet, 3 to 5 seconds that's insanely a long amount of time, right? But guys can't do it. Despite everybody being on the internet about how I can shoot A zone, sub second. It's like, well, how come nobody's doing that in the field? Nobody's actually able to get, because under stress in the real world, it's harder. If I can get a shot at 75 yards on an 8-inch, basically, an 8-minute target at, within 3 seconds, I have success. And I kill a lot of animals that way. So it's something that I focus a lot on and I enjoy it. And I don't have to worry about botching a wind call. I don't have to worry about, all these things, my turrets being moved or whatever. I don't have to worry about that. Put the rifle up, kill it, and it's done. It's a very simple process. What was he? And then for my own training. So for my own training, I really do. I like to run. I don't actually have a name for it. I call it the cold bounce. That's my last name. But one of my favorite shooting scenarios for hunters, something I like to get guys to try, is getting the pack off. So wearing pack, full buckles and everything. Get the pack off, drop it down, get down to prone, and I run this at 100 yards, usually on 8-inch steel, and get down, make a shot off the pack, then immediately stand to get a follow-up shot. And what that does is it replicates a very common hunting scenario where a guy sees an animal, can get down to prone and make a shot. Once you've made the shot, now it's on the move, or you maybe think you wounded it, or it's obstructed by brush or something like that. You usually get a second to try to get another shot. If you can stand and get another impact, worst case scenario, you're not going to wound it worse, right? So it gives you an opportunity to potentially put down a wounded animal. And I think that drill, it really does a lot for that quick target acquisition under pressure, under movement like that.
Nice. I like it.
And then I run a couple of other different drills. I really like Jeff Cooper's snapshot drill.
Okay.
which that one was a funny one. I posted a video on the other day, and it's funny because the Instagram comments are like, "Oh, this is unimpressive. This is so unimpressive." And Cooper's snapshot drill is basically it's a 4-inch target at 25 yards. You should be able to get it. Par time is 1.5 seconds with the rifle out front of you, barrel in front of your nose, and butt at the hip. And it's a good drill. I wouldn't say that, it's maybe a touch harder than like a ready up at high ready, just because you got to move the rifle so far.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very similar drill. But it's funny. It's kind of funny because I posted that one the other day. You have all these guys that are like, "Oh, this is so unimpressive. Like, you're only at 25 yards." And those are the same guys that if you shoot, a 300 yard A zone or, even a D zone, whatever, you shoot at 300 yards on a man-sized target, and guys are like, "Oh yeah, well, when would I ever shoot at 300? You should do it at 25. You do it at 25. And everybody's like, "Oh, this is not impressive. You should do it at 300. So it's just part of that whole like egotistical shooting nightmare that we live in, right?
Well, and you hit it on the head on one of your videos, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but yeah, you may not be taking a 300-yard offhand or standing position shot, but why shouldn't you develop the marksmanship level to achieve that on a regular basis? That's my argument when it comes to things like that. I will argue that with a carbine, a civilian's going to have a hard time articulating a defensive shooting with the carbine beyond 50 yards. Now, does that mean we shouldn't be good as civilians beyond that 50 yards? I think that all civilians should own 300 and in at least. I know that's not asking a whole lot, but a majority of the American people don't own that either. So I think that's a good start. But that's my point. Am I wrong in my representation of that? Is that,
No.
you getting good at that type of marksmanship, say at 300 like that, just makes you a better marksman.
Yeah, I think that's the irony of it, is that I do take a little bit, and it's something that I catch a lot of friction for online. Some people want to call you a FUD or whatever, but I do train a lot at those 300, like 300 yards is I shoot a lot offhand at 300, and the reason that I enjoy it is because you have a very small margin of error, even for a D zone impact. You have a very small margin of error at that distance, a lot smaller than the average shooter realizes. And
Absolutely.
then when you bring it into 25 yards, I shoot 25 yards too. But I'm not an A zone impact at 25 yards for me with a rifle or a carbine is like, it doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there's a big culture, especially in the like AR-15 rapid fire shooting world now, where guys are putting a lot of emphasis in the CQB stuff, right? About like, oh, I'm gonna transition from multiple different targets at 25 yards, and the reality is, I think for armed professionals, if you're police or you're in a unit or whatever, or your SWAT team, like I think that that's an important skill to learn. I think that it's something you should have. The reality of it is, from a practical sense, for me, if I can get one round A zone at 300 with a rifle, that means that I'm going to successfully kill game. At 25 yards and in, if I'm going to have a gunfight, it's with a handgun.
Yep.
I'm not going to, if you break into my house in the middle of the night, I got guns everywhere. I'm going to kill you with a handgun. That's just the way it works. It's impractical for me to be trying to transition to multiple targets with an AR-15 at 25 yards. And I think from the competitive standpoint, if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely incredible. Good for you. I hope they have fun doing it. For 99% of guys, especially that are concerned about self-defense, a night gun or a handgun on the nightstand that's realistic. Like that's how you can protect your family. That's how if somebody tries to rob you at the gas station, if somebody tries to assault you or kill you, chances are if you're gonna have a gunfight, it's gonna be at 3 to 7 yards with a handgun. So I'm all about a bill drill with a handgun at 3 yards or 7 yards, or I'm all about it. But once you break out the rifle at 3 yards, I'm like, man, that's not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So what I would say, and that's one of the things that I engaged you with, I think it is important, especially for law enforcement, to understand their holdovers. Say for instance, the sight over bore, like if they've got to take a precision, when I mean precision shot, they've got a hostage shot where all they see is this, something. And I know I'm hypothetical, but understanding that with that 25 yards and in, that if they're wanting to hit here, they're going to have to put their dot or their front sight higher. I think it's important for people to understand that. But beyond that, I'm with you. I think there's too much emphasis on blasting away at targets, 25 yards and in. In a way, man, you're just burning up a lot of ammo. I think people should spend a little more time deliberate marksmanship.
I think
And
that.
real,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think that you don't you don't get realistic feedback on what your deficits are, and it's a lot of it's excusable, right? They're like, well, it's pretty good for considering I was blasting as fast as I could and I was transitioning, and it to me that kind of takes away from the whole purpose of the training itself, right? Is that I should be working through isolated accuracy that's intent on what I'm doing so that when I need it, I can perform that way under stress, under speed.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. And here's another factor that people aren't considering is that at some point and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not at all claiming that, but I've got, training under some people that are, and it gets dangerous when you start going to these 6.16 splits and you're just blasting away. In some cases, you may be seeing the legal process and you may be fighting that. Why did you continue shooting after they were no longer a threat? Doesn't always happen, but when blasting away splits that fast, you can shoot faster with an AR too. So, I've heard some of my mentors call them jailbait splits. I think
Right.
you should be able to do it. I think it's great, like a GM shooter, but, and I'm going to forget his name again, Lee Weems. I'm sure you're out there listening. I think his first name's Keith, but he's a law enforcement officer that also is a GM in USPSA. And he talking about, hey, it's great that I've gotten to this point, but you know what? In a real shooting, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to slow down because I'm going to make sure that I'm making ethical decisions, or legal decisions really is the proper terminology. But yeah, at some point you got to keep that stuff in mind too, is those
Well,
jailbait splits.
yeah, and as well as personal accountability. I mean, I worry about that a lot. I think about that. Like, I don't anymore. I live way out in the country, you know, and I'm gonna tell you a story. When I was probably, I think I was 18. I was either 18 or 19, and I had a guy try to rob me outside of a McDonald's in Fort Worth, Texas,
Mm,
and I broke his nose with a 45.
mm.
But I remember thinking after that,
Meaning you struck him with it?
I struck him
Okay.
with it.
Yep.
Yeah, because
Gotcha.
because it happened that fast,
Yep.
and but I remember, afterwards, it wasn't like a big thing, and then I thought about it a lot. I thought about it a lot afterwards. You kind of had that, whatever you could consider like trauma response. But
Mhm.
I think about it when I think back about it now. There's a whole glass window full of people behind me,
Mm.
right? So it's like if you miss, like if I say I was a shot, if I had shot him and I
Mhm.
missed, say I missed on the draw or whatever, then and you potentially kill somebody's kid or something.
Absolutely.
Even if for some reason that you legally survive that, you have to live with that the rest of your life. And you think about that personal accountability, and when you're rapid fire blasting like that, and you got a D zone hit or whatever, you're off your cardboard. When it comes, if you don't have like cognizant understanding of your accountability there, then what happens when you kill your old lady neighbor because somebody broke into your house? You kill them. You also killed your neighbor through the drywall in your apartment complex, and maybe, like I said, for whatever reason, legally you survive that, and you don't go to prison, you still got to live with it. You killed that lady,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
so why not focus so hard on accountability?
Right. Yeah. And another example of that is these individuals that they say that, hey, somebody breaks in my house, they're getting around, they're getting shot, and and then you ask them, hey, what if it's some young kid that has a girlfriend down the street and he gets an address wrong, and I'm articulating. Craig Douglas says some of these pretty often, but they're well worth repeating. Is and the kid gets the address wrong, and I mean, are you going to draw down and shoot that young teenager just because they came over your threshold? It's the line in the sand. No, I think that's another factor that the ego drives that attitude, and you have to be able to positively ID if a person is a threat in your home, regardless if they're in your home. You might have the legal justification, but boy, if you shoot somebody that shouldn't have been shot, you're gonna go through the process, and you may pay dearly, with your freedom. And also, you hit it on the head. You're gonna pay for it mentally too, because I don't know a lot of people that are well balanced, for the most part, are going to be able to live well with a
No,
decision
and
like that.
and you have to be so careful with how you say it. What I mean? Because you're your own biggest influence. What you say is what, for the most part, influences what you do more than anything else.
And yeah,
You have to have that accountability mentally as well as performance wise.
I mean, it's a rehearsal.
It
You
is.
should be thinking about these things. We talk about this on the show a lot. These mental rehearsals, right? And we were just talking about it the other evening about how us as alpha, males or females in some cases too, um, we get slighted, and I mean, I was young once, full of piss and vinegar, and and I mean, I was in martial arts way back in high school, and wrestling, all that stuff. I had pride, but the truth is that we should be rehearsing on responses. I think about it all the time. Hey, buddy, my bad. I apologize.
Right.
I didn't mean to slight you. I didn't see you there. I didn't notice you were waiting on this parking spot. I apologize. Have a good day. We should be rehearsing those things all the time, because you know what? Regardless, you're carrying, right? You just said that you carry all the time. You and I have brought a gun to whatever fight ensues, because if we let our ego and our emotional response take over, and our amygdala take over, and next thing we know, we're in a fight that wasn't necessary, that we could have simply de-escalated,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. And that de-escalation is so important. I mean, I don't know. I think that's one thing. It very much separates like my realm of shooting from what I would call like the tactical realm. I would say there's the hunting realm and there's the tactical realm, and everything that we do, everything that I push really hard to teach in my realm is all accountability based, right? Because you've now eliminated the self harm aspect of it, and so you're looking at 100% accountability to the law, to your ethics. Whereas the tactical shooting realm, like you have that muddied water, right? Of like, well, I need to be accountable as much as I can, but I also have to, make those decisions quickly to be able to keep myself alive or keep my family alive or do whatever that takes. Um, there's an interesting paradox between the two realms, because what you get in the tactical shooting realm is you get lots and lots of reps. You get lots of rehearsal. And for the most part, probably 99%, probably even more than that, of people that are going through these reps, thousands of them, they'll never actually use any of the skills that they're learning. And so there becomes, it's like, well, it's a martial art. Shooting is a martial art, 100%. So now it becomes this like, spiritual relationship, whatever you want to call it. That it's a martial art.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going through these thousands of reps. I'm probably never going to need them. And so on the hunting realm, you don't see guys getting those reps. They're not going through the 10,000 reps. They're absolutely going and intending to use that skill set
Very good point.
without the reps. So you have this paradox, right? Tactical shooting, all the reps, none of the performance. Hunting, like none of the reps, and winging performance. And it's a crazy thing because if you get a guy that he takes his training seriously in the hunting realm, he's going to go out, be ultra successful, and have a lot of fun doing it. If you can take guys from the tactical realm and I bring them over into the hunting realm, it can be really hard to establish that intent on accountability, because guys are really quick to shoot. They're really quick to shoot, really quick to make decisions, really quick to unfortunately make bad decisions, get into bad shooting positions, and enforce things, because the tactical shooting realm really pushes guys into like effective, quick action. And you have that that loop, right, of like observe, orient, decide, act.
Mm-hmm. The
And
OODA
you
loop,
need to
or
be able.
OODA loop, as they
Yeah,
said. Boyd. It was said that Boyd didn't like the OODA, but all of us say OODA.
yeah. That's funny. I like it. I like it because
Yep.
it's very relevant to what I do. So like in the tactical shooting realm, you've got guys that are they're kind of through repetition, they're trained to act quickly, and maybe they're not so like emphasized on accountability for the shot. Whereas a lot of hunting, we're all about accountability over speed. If we have to slow things down or make things not happen to be able to come back to it, loop back to it later and be successful, then that's something that we do. And unfortunately, I do see a lot of guys that come from that tactical shooting base wounding animals or trying to rush shots and things like that, because it's just what's built into you through repetition, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. Oh, it makes perfect sense, and I can give you another parallel. I mean, you're tuned into all this. You sound like you've got a lot of knowledge in my realm too. The truth is that we and I'm guilty of it, because pistol and carbine competition is something I do for fun, and I do believe that competitive shooting, IDPA, USPSA, is a good learning tool, right? But the likelihood of me being in a shooting versus a health incident versus being able to help somebody with medical care, emergency medical care. One of our mentors, Larry Lindemann, says you can't shoot a heart attack in the face. And so, being that
Yeah.
the majority, heart disease is obviously the biggest killer, right? And so you'll have all these individuals, they spend so much time on the gear and the shooting, and yet their ticker couldn't handle the stress of a real gunfight, right? So it's again this kind of the same thing where people in the tactical community need to spend a little more time on the fitness realm than they do the shooting. But that's just the paradigm that folks shift towards. But yeah, I mean, it's a similar but dissimilar kind of situation. But yeah, I mean, you and then furthermore, you're way more than likely to use empty hand skills than you are going to be a lethal tool. So again, that's where individuals that carry for self defense, there's a high percentage that don't see it that way. They see that pistol as a talisman that wards off evil, and they don't consider all the other realms. But anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in general, a lot of guys are way more reliant on their rifle, their handgun, all the gear that they've acquired than they have themselves. And I think that it's a really cool trend that I've seen online lately. Everybody's like, "Oh, cool gun. Why are you fat?" I love that. I love that, man, because you can't you can't buy you can't buy enough crap to make up for it. Like your own health, right? Like that's the whole purpose of it, right? Is that I buy all these things to keep myself alive. It's like, you'll spend all this money on a rifle, and you'll spend all this money on a handgun and a plate carrier and all these things to keep your family safe, but like you won't quit eating little Debbie snacks just like
Hmm.
all day. And like you won't get up and go for a jog. You won't
Hmm.
put a pack on and go for a ruck and make sure that you are healthy. You won't be present for your children. Like how are you gonna be so self-righteous that I'm gonna buy all these things to protect my family from the world, but you can't fight the things that are keeping you down as a man? That you have guys have this like addiction to porn or television or cigarettes or
Very
alcohol or whatever. Like you've got this whole list of demons, and you're worried about buying a handgun to keep your family safe. And I'm not saying that I think a handgun is bad, but I think that like you need to cut out all that other crap, because
Mhm.
that is the real danger to you. And it's just
Absolutely.
hard to break that to people.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's fun to buy gear. It's sexy. It makes us feel good. It makes me feel good. I like gear too. But I definitely we try to drive home that piece that, people should be at least a few times a week. If not, we would prefer more doing some baseline cardiovascular work and some strength work as a minimum. And, it'd be great if they include jujitsu or wrestling in that. But I've relented. I used to be like, hey, if they're doing anything, they need to do some fitness, but they need to be doing jujitsu or something in that in the grappling realm. But Cecil Birch, one of our mentors, he has me thinking a little bit different about it. That really driving home the fitness piece first, and then if they can get in a combative seminar or an ECQC or one of Cecil's immediate action combatives classes, that they'll be a lot better off. And I apologize, Kate. I think I've went in too many tangents and pulled away from a lot of the subjects I wanted to talk with you about. But I really appreciate you engaging me in kind of combining both of our worlds. Well, really, it sounds to me like you're just as much in my world as well. With that said, we're getting so we got about 20 more minutes or so, if that's okay. With you, I'm curious. Speaking of shooting skills, have you seen the newer NRA ARC or the American Rifle Challenge competition that's just popped up? Have you seen that?
I have seen. I've had a couple people message me about it, and I haven't actually taken the time to look into it. But from my understanding, it's like a very practical course of fire, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I'll send you the rule book, or actually, better yet, I'll send you a YouTube video where I forget, was it Ready Time TV or was it Gun Talk? I believe.
Oh yeah, Tom Gresham.
Yeah, Tom Gresham. Right.
He's a good
So
guy. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And the level one is very, very practical. And I mean, it's just a quick example or enunciation of the basics of it. It starts at 10. You mentioned ready up. It's basically you do some ready ups at 10 yards. Um, then you go out to you do some reloads in that. I won't go over every single portion of it, but you do some reloads in there. You go all the way back to 25, do some offhand ready ups, and then also engage like 5 to 10 rounds in 25 in the offhand position. But the target to get a perfect score is just a 4-inch circle all the
Oh
way back
yeah.
to 100, right? And so then you're shooting from obviously standing, you're doing kneeling and seated between, and those are all at 50 and 100 is primarily prone. But then the fourth ending stage, you've got similar to a Vickers or VTAC barricade, the step, it's very similar, but it's NRA's version. And you've got a steel plate. I think it's a 10-inch plate at 100 yards. And you have to shoot in each one of those positions twice. But
Okay.
here's the kicker. If you miss that plate, it adds 10 full seconds to your time. So everything else up to that point is a par time. And they're fairly conservative par times. Like if you're really good at doing that type of tactical shooting, for instance, it's not really tactical in this sense. Those times are going to be easy, but if you want to shoot the best score, you're going for perfect accuracy in it, right?
Right.
And but back to the steel portion, yeah, you can get into a kind of wonky position and you got a little bit of wobble and you still take the shot and you zip around it. 10 full seconds added to your score, because that portion is where it's actual time and score. So yeah,
Right.
I mean, for a basic level 1, it gets people in the door. It's a low barrier of entry. You only need 3 magazines or 4 magazines. I think it's 3. A rifle with iron sights, typically an AR is where the focus, but any kind of autoloader is going to work, even a rimfire 22, and an empty chamber indicator. That's it. You can do your reloads from your pocket.
That's
And
awesome.
that's what I like about it. It's, even though it only goes out to 100, you are held to a high accuracy standard, right? And then
Right.
the level 2 is like out to 400 or 500, and it's kind of a combination of a gas gun PRS and IDPA at some closer distances. I love it. I've been shooting them. I've got the state matches coming up here in the beginning of August.
Yeah, I need to look into that and see. I'd like to compete in something like that because I really enjoy that. I enjoy that type of like emphasis on fundamental type shooting. Like I do the cabin fever challenge every year.
Yeah, I was going to
And
bring that up. Mhm.
yeah. So like, and it's very similar, right? Is that it's out of Canada, Rifle Chair puts it on. And, I've shot it a couple of times and I run through that course of fire or a similar course of fire a lot in training. And then, essentially it's standing, kneeling, prone, back up to seated. And, an 8-inch regulation target. And then every hit, inside your 8-inch circle counts for a point. And I think you got to divide it by your time, multiply it by 100. I can't remember exactly how you score it.
Some kind of hit factor of some
Yeah, and
sort.
it's hard, and I've run it with the scout rifle as well as with the AR-15. And the one thing that I love about it is because I do a lot of scout rifle content, right? Is
Yes.
people love to shit on the scout rifle and say, yeah, well, I just use an AR-15. And I can tell you that I think my top 2 best scores, AR-15 and scout rifle, I'm like within 10 seconds of each other because
That's
it's when you're trying to fine tune accuracy, like just the speed of the action is like it's irrelevant. How fast the rifle loads itself or doesn't is totally irrelevant to your ability as a shooter, especially at those distances from field positions. Like I'm all about, it's all about sight picture, fundamentals, good natural point of aim, and trigger pull. I mean, it all culminates together. So it's ironic to me, especially online, when people will be like, oh, well, scout rifle's lame. Like I'll just use my AR-15. And it's like, man, realistically, a guy that's well trained with a bolt action rifle is going to smoke you. If you have a gunfight, all things considered equal, if you don't have that same level of training, you can't miss fast enough to catch up.
And it's got an intermediate cartridge. I mean, my AR-15 loadouts, like my shorter barrels, I'm running 70 grain brown tip or the all copper that's optimized for SBRs. And my main ARs, I run 77 grain Black Hills. I
Yep.
want a heavier bullet in my AR. But to your point, man, you're running a Scout with, a 7.65 Creed or a 308. When that hits, man, I mean, let's just face it, it does a lot better than 5.56. It's
Oh
just
yeah, I mean, even if you're wearing plates, 180 grain 308 at 2,600 feet per second, like you're incapacitated for a second.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But back to the arc, you should check it out. I,
Yeah.
I would really, just knowing some of the content that you put out and your thought process towards marksmanship, I think you would love it, and I think you'd also do very well at it with your attitude towards marksmanship. But it is certainly what I have talked about many times recently is a newer shooter gets all the fundamentals, they get all the manual of arms multiple times with supervised from ROs, and so they learn the AR-15 or the rifle a lot faster than people just going to the range on their own. And so a newer shooter can do well or do okay, but a really experienced shooter is going to be have a tough time cleaning that course. It's just a fact. So you get this
Right.
broad range of skills, and it's neat. I really dig it.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. I'm definitely gonna have to look into it. I like stuff like that because I want to know. I want to see. I want to see those shortcomings. If you're training and you're not seeing any shortcomings, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, and you can certainly the course of fire is in the rule book. I'm sure that you've got the location where you can run through it just and check it out, see what you think. I think you would like it a lot. Now, Cade, so we're getting again towards the close of the show here. I did want to talk about your scout rifle. Tell us, because I dig that attitude towards the scout rifle. You mentioned Jeff Cooper earlier. Obviously, to my knowledge, that specific type of scout rifle was kind of a brainchild of Jeff Cooper. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but talk about the scout rifle and your feelings towards it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because everybody everybody kind of thinks that like just because I'm a Jeff Cooper fan, like that's why I'm a Scout Rifle fan. But I enjoyed Jeff Cooper from an early age, from a teenager, and I thought that, well, here's a guy that he's got a storied military background. He's also a big game hunter. He's just got a very good understanding of practical marksmanship, of the necessity of a practical rifle. And then it took me many years to get into the scout rifle myself. And the thing that started it out was I needed something lightweight and short that wasn't a hindrance for me to carry as a backup rifle for hunters. Because guys break their guns, stuff happens. Like I've seen rifles broken in half and all kinds of stuff when you're, 40 miles back in the wilderness, or, you're on an airplane, and airplanes are notorious for like rattling,
Yep.
Like rings loose and all that. And then now you're in the middle of the woods and you've only got one gun and it's lost its zero and the guy's only got 20 rounds, whatever, and you're trying to re-zero rifles. It's just a whole disaster. So that's why I got into the scout rifle. I'm like, well, here's a way that I can carry a lightweight rifle and it'll be a backup, if nothing else. And I started out with no optic because I was like, well, the long eye relief thing, like whatever. I just need a short rifle that I can put on a horse, throw in an airplane, whatever. And then over the years, I started to I just really liked it, fell in love with the concept of a short bolt action rifle that is easy to manipulate, very accurate for what it is. And I've got all that power. So now I'm lighter than an AR-15 with all that 308 power in a really short, easy handle package. Mm-hmm. So I started getting into the long eye relief scope deal. And now I have a bunch of different scout rifles, right? And it's funny because everybody wants to play it off as, an irrelevant concept, or, if the long eye relief scope was good, then we'd see them on, ARs and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of it is having that little bitty lens way out there on front, mm-hmm. In front of the rifle, it's so intuitive on a little bolt action rifle for getting on target quickly that I've got that optic. Just buried as low as it'll go on the rail, low 2-power magnification. So I've got this huge field of view in front of me. So when I'm shooting, real world shooting on moving targets, and then that's the reality of what I do, right? Is that a lot of my shooting, it's living, breathing things. I'm killing living, breathing animals. Some of them are moving. The whole thing is it's unique in a sense. So having that little bitty lens out there where I can quickly acquire a target and I can actually see something that's moving outside of the rifle while I have it shouldered. So I have a sight picture of what I'm looking at, but I can also see an animal moving so that when it comes into view, I can shoot it. You just can't do that with a traditionally mounted optic. You can't. It's something that you can do with an EOTech or an aim point, but you cannot do that with anything else. An LPVO you can, but outside of one power, you can't, right? So you still have all the same issues. So it just, it makes sense. But unfortunately, it's one of those things that it's really easy for people to just discount it, because what Cooper did was he made a rifle for the rifleman.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to use it in the field to understand how great it is. There's nobody that's gone out there and taken a gun sight 270 course and been like, the scout rifle junk. There's a reason that that gun sight's still running the 270 course,
Mm-hmm.
and they're booked out for every one of them because it works. And once you hold the rifle and you realize that, wow, I have a 6.5 pound rifle, less than 3 feet long, with a shit ton of kinetic energy for what it is, you feel so capable, and I feel however you want about it. Like, if I was to have a gunfight in the Walmart parking lot or whatever, or the shit hits the fan or whatever, and I've got that rifle, I would say that, 90% of people on the other end are not going to have a good day.
Nope, not at all. And if I can add something to that, Cade, is that we are an election away from an administration that might get the chance to turn the Supreme Court towards the left, right? That means that within an election season, we could see some real bans get through and get sustained even in court battles. Now, I know that would take quite a while because we've had so much gain. I mean, Bruin and Heller, and a lot of the cases, even some cases that are starting to make it to the Supreme Court right now, is the AR-15 or the semi-auto rifle is always under threat, right? It will always be. And the fact remains is that a bolt action rifle of the capability of a scout rifle is probably something smart for those of us that are serious about our Second Amendment rights, because it could happen. It could happen in our lifetime where there are some successful bans. And especially for, like, I'm in my early 50s now. My son, he has his 5-year-old son. I'm thinking about what's going to happen for him and for my grandson, right? So I think it is important for folks to look at it that way. And the scout rifle is a perfect solution in that environment. And I think you would agree, if somebody's good with that scout rifle, yeah, it sucks to be to have your AR-15 taken away or you no longer can get them. But if you can run that scout rifle, you're going to do all right. And I'll add one more thing to it. Notice what happened in Australia.
Yep.
Just over a year ago.
Yep.
I have been saying for a long time, the left's all concerned about the AR-15, but wait until some individuals, terrorists or otherwise, decide they're going to start using a bunch of bolt action rifles that use them well in a shooting. It's going to be way worse. Right?
Yeah, and that guy was the perfect example. And it's funny because it's unfortunate. It's not funny. It's very frustrating for me because so much of my content online is scout rifle based, that what I have is when I put anything out there about using it in a dynamic environment, that I have a ton of feedback by people that are like, this is dumb, it's antiquated, I'm just going to use my AR-15. And at the same time, out of those 60,000 followers or whatever, 15 or 20,000 of those people are Australians and Canadians, and among various other countries. But the amount of Australians and Canadians that I have that follow me online that will actively reach out and say, hey, I really appreciate your scout rifle content because it makes me feel capable. Yes. And I'm like, man, you are capable. And the idea for a guy with very little training to say, well, I have an AR-15, so I'm automatically better off than this guy. It's like, man, it's like it's not even, it's night and day, right? Like, oh well, this guy, this is all he's got, and he's concerned about his safety, so he's out there practicing with his Ruger gun sight, and like he's good. He can get a first round impact in a second and a half. I mean, it's like, and if man, if you can't do that, push comes to shove. I mean, you're not better. Yeah, you can get 30 rounds out before he can get 6 or 7, but I mean, if he makes a first round impact, he wins.
Well,
You know.
and I know we're beating a dead horse when it comes to proficiency, and I don't mean to be an asshole, but the majority of those people talking shit about, I'm just going to have my AR. I mean, I got to point towards the arc. I want to put that person that's always talking shit. I want to put them through that arc course of fire, and let's see how well you do with your AR-15 with that. Because in many cases, I'm not trying to sound from an arrogant standpoint. Again, most individuals can't run what they got in the first place, but again, to really drive home, our show is about trying to encourage people to look internally, and if they do have deficiencies, you have ways that we talk on here all the time or make recommendations that you can alleviate that. But I love your scout content. Again, that's probably what caught my eye first. And then I really liked your attitude towards, calling out people that are talking shit, but, they can't even use what they have. And then, of course, your passion for hunting. You seem to have a passion for your freedoms and self-reliance, and that definitely is appealing to me. To be honest, Cade, I think I've taken enough of your time, but before we get off here, can you? And I'm going to put a lot of this in the show notes, but people like to hear it on audio. Tell us where folks can find you, and anything else you want to put out there business wise, things you got upcoming, any of that.
Yeah. So, first off, like you can find me online. Facebook is usually my best spot. Just Cade Cole, CADECOLE, and then Instagram. I think I'm Cade Cole 888 or something like that. Uh, and then yeah, so I run the Roadhouse School for Hunters and Guides, and we'll have some openings for 2027 for our elk hunting masterclass. They usually book up pretty quick. And then a friend of mine will probably be putting on maybe a little bit of a scout rifle oriented hunting class. I haven't quite put that one together yet, but I'll probably have that information available sometime soon if you follow me online. And then you guys can always shoot me an email at cadecole8@gmail.com. And so, yeah, I really, really appreciate you having me on, man.
Well, it's been great, brother. I really like your attitude, and I really like what you're putting out there. And we'll have to have you come back on. There was a couple of questions I'd like to hit on at a later time if you got time in the future. But man, I really appreciate you coming on and blessing our audience with your wisdom. And man, you're just love of freedom, man. I dig it. So
thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
With that said, don't hang up just yet when I hit stop on the record, but it's been a blessing hanging out with you, Cade. We'll see you soon, brother.
All right.